When you spend your entire life as a shadow, you learn to appreciate the unique physics of invisibility. You learn that a shadow isn't an absence of light, but a presence of form. It has shape, it has a boundary, and it's inextricably tied to the object that casts it. For 15 years, I was my sister's shadow. My name is Nicola, and the object that cast me, the one who stood in the blinding glare of the spotlight, was Natasha. To the world, she was Natasha Starr, the fiercely authentic action hero who did all her own stunts. To me, she was the reason for the hairline fracture in my left tibia, the perpetual ache in my right shoulder, and the collection of faded yellow and purple bruises that I used to call my work uniform. We had a system, elegant in its cruelty. I would train for months, mastering the choreography of a fall from a 5-story building, or the brutal ballet of a fight scene against a dozen men. I would execute it on film day, my body absorbing the impact, the scrapes, the jarring shock of hitting a thinly padded patch of concrete. The medics would patch me up. I'd limp back to my nondescript apartment, and a few months later, I'd watch Natasha on a late-night talk show, laughing as she told the host how she got that nasty little bruise on her hip, while filming the exact scene that had sent me to physical therapy for 6 weeks. She was a brilliant actress, I'll give her that. Her greatest performance was convincing the world that my pain was her own. Our parents, Eleanor and Robert, were her biggest fans, and the architects of this arrangement. They called it keeping it in the family. It was a family business where I was the sole, uncredited, and frequently injured capital asset. The beginning of the end came with a single phone call. Natasha had just landed the lead in Athelgard's Legacy, a billion-dollar fantasy epic. It was the kind of role that makes a star into a legend. For me, it meant a year of intense wire work, sword fighting, and probably another concussion. I was already mapping out a new training regimen when my phone buzzed with her picture on the screen. I answered with the usual, "Hey Tosh, saw the news. Congratulations. When do I get the script?" There was a pause. Not a warm, sisterly pause. It was the cool, sterile pause of a corporate transaction. "Nikki, hi," she began, using the childhood nickname that felt like a tiny splinter under the skin. "Listen, about the film. I'm so excited. It's a massive step up. The studio, the director, everyone is top tier." I felt a cold dread begin to pool in my stomach. "Okay," I said slowly. "So what's the timeline? I need to start conditioning for the broadsword work." "Well, that's the thing," she said, her voice taking on a tone of feigned sympathy that was far more insulting than outright cruelty. "The studio's insurance policy is complicated. They're insisting on a dedicated stunt team, A-listers, people with, a more professional pedigree. A more professional pedigree." The words hung in the air, each one a perfectly aimed dart. 15 years of broken bones, of sprains, of being her physical shield, and the verdict was in. I was unprofessional. I who had studied her every micro-expression so I could replicate her posture in a free fall. I who knew how she carried her weight when she ran, how she would turn her head a split second before a punch, how to make my body her body. "What are you saying, Natasha?" I asked, my voice flat. "I'm saying that for this one, I have to go with the team the studio wants. It's out of my hands," she lied. It was a smooth, practiced lie. We both knew she had an ironclad contract and could have insisted on me. She just didn't want to. I was a relic of her smaller, less glamorous past, a living, breathing reminder that she wasn't quite the self-made hero she pretended to be. I was a secret she was finally powerful enough to bury. "So I'm fired," I said. It wasn't a question. "Don't be so dramatic, Nikki. It's not firing. It's an evolution. My career is evolving." She let out a little, tinkling laugh. "Look, I'll make sure you get a nice severance. A little something to tide you over." A severance. Like I was a line item on a budget she was trimming. The shadow was being downsized. I didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. I could hear the clinking of ice in a glass on her end. She was probably on the veranda of her sprawling Hollywood Hills home, looking out over the city that adored her, casually ending my career between sips of cucumber-infused water. "Nikki? Are you there?" "I'm here," I whispered. "Good. Well, listen, I have to run." A meeting with the producers. We'll talk soon. Love you. The line went dead. I stood in my small apartment, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone. Outside my window, the sky was a bruised purple, the same color my ribs had been after her last movie, Directive Zero. The nice severances she mentioned never materialized. Why would it? There was no contract, no paperwork, nothing to prove that I had been anything more than a helpful sister. My entire career was a ghost, and it had just been exorcised. It wasn't just about the job, it was the erasure, the complete and total dismissal of every sacrifice I had ever made. And for the first time, looking at my own reflection in the darkening window, I didn't see a shadow. I saw a fool. It was a distinction that would change everything. The first week was a blur of shock and a strange, hollow silence. For 15 years, my days had been dictated by a rigorous schedule of pain and preparation for Natasha. Physical therapy at 7, weight training at 9, fight choreography at noon, flexibility, and yoga at 3. My body was a temple dedicated to a goddess who had just declared it obsolete. Now the silence in my apartment was deafening, broken only by the creaks and groans of a body that had been treated like a rental car driven hard and put away wet. The ache in my shoulder felt deeper, the twinge in my knee more pronounced. Without the purpose of the next film, they weren't just injuries, they were souvenirs of a wasted life. My bank account was a testament to my own stupidity. I'd always been paid in cash, off the books, as our father used to say with a wink. It was simpler that way, he'd insisted. No taxes, no agents, no messy paper trail linking Natasha's pristine image to my battered body. It was a brilliant strategy for her, but for me it meant I had no official work history, no savings plan, no unemployment benefits to claim. I had a few $1,000s tucked away, enough for a couple of months' rent if I was careful. After that, I was staring into an abyss. I spent my days scrolling through job listings for personal trainers, yoga instructors, anything that could utilize my highly specific yet completely undocumented skill set. The rejections were polite but firm. No official certifications, no verifiable employment history, no references. How could I ask for a reference? Yes, my sister, the international movie star, can verify that I know how to get hit by a car without dying. Shall I give you her publicist's number? It was during that second week, while I was staring at an eviction notice I knew was only a month or two away, that the real breakdown happened. I was making a cup of tea, and my hand trembled as I picked up the kettle. My right hand, the one that had been sprained on the set of Crimson Tide, the one with the knuckles that were permanently swollen from a fight scene in Nightfall. I looked down at it, really looked at it, and I saw a roadmap of my own erasure. Every scar, every callus, was a testament to a moment of her glory. And then my eyes fell on the one scar that was uniquely mine, a story she could never tell. It was a jagged silvery crescent on the fleshy part of my forearm, just below the wrist. I got it on a film called Echo Point, a low-budget sci-fi thriller we'd done about 8 years prior. It was my first big wirework stunt. A safety line had frayed and snapped, sending me swinging into a piece of exposed rebar on the set. It was a deep, nasty gash. The on-set medic was useless, and the production was too cheap to halt filming for a proper hospital visit. Marcus Vance, the director, a gruff, no-nonsense man with an artist's eye, had been the only one who seemed genuinely horrified. He'd ripped his own bandana off his head and pressed it against the wound, screaming for a real medic while Natasha stood off to the side, tapping her foot impatiently, annoyed about the delay. She'd later told a journalist she'd gotten the scar during a rock-climbing mishap in Thailand. Seeing that scar, that one tangible piece of my history that she'd stolen and repurposed, broke something deep inside me. The dam of resentment, built over a decade and a half of quiet sacrifice, finally burst. It wasn't a loud, dramatic shatter. It was a silent, catastrophic flood of cold, hard clarity. The grief was overwhelming. I sank to the linoleum floor of my kitchen, the eviction notice clutched in my hand, and I wept. I wept for the girl who thought protecting her sister was the noblest thing in the world. I wept for the woman who had traded her future for a pat on the head and a cash-stuffed envelope. I wept for the sheer, idiotic waste of it all. To understand why I let it go on for so long, you have to understand my family. Our parents, Eleanor and Robert, were obsessed with appearances. They weren't wealthy, but they were masters of projecting success. Natasha was their masterpiece. She was born with a spark, an innate charisma that drew people in. I was quieter, more practical. When we were kids, Natasha fell out of a treehouse. She was screaming, more from shock than pain. Without thinking, I shimmied down the rope after her, landed wrong, and fractured my ankle. As I sat there, my foot swelling to the size of a grapefruit, our mother rushed past me to cradle a perfectly fine Natasha, cooing about how brave she was. Our father looked at me, lying on the ground, and said, "Well, Nikki, looks like you're the tough one. You'll be fine." That became the narrative of our lives. Natasha was the brilliant, fragile star. I was the tough one, the reliable one, the one who could handle it. When Natasha decided she wanted to be an actress, they poured every spare dollar into her headshots and acting classes. When she got her first role that required a small stunt, a simple fall from a horse, she panicked. She was terrified of getting hurt, of marring the perfect canvas of her face. I had been riding since I was 6. "Nikki can do it," our father had declared. "She looks enough like her from a distance." So I did it. I put on the wig and the costume, and I fell off that horse. And when Natasha was praised for her bravery, I felt a strange surge of pride. We had done it. That was the poison. For years I believed her success was our success. I was the secret engine in the glorious machine of her career. Every time she won an award, every time her face was on a magazine cover, a small, foolish part of me felt like I was up there with her. It was a powerful delusion, one my parents carefully cultivated. They'd call me after a premiere, gushing about Natasha, and would tack on at the end, "And you were wonderful too, dear." The fall from the car looked so real. They never said my name. They never acknowledged the risk. I was just the fall. My best friend, Chloe, a fellow stunt performer I'd met years ago, was the only one who saw the truth. She was a powerhouse, a woman who had fought for every credit, every contract, every bit of recognition in a male-dominated field. She had warned me for years. "Nicola, they're exploiting you," she'd say over cheap beer after a long day of training. "A handshake and a stack of cash isn't a career, it's a liability. What happens when you can't do it anymore? Or when she decides she doesn't need you?" I'd always brush it off, defending my family, defending Natasha. The loyalty was a cage I had built for myself, lying on my kitchen floor, surrounded by the ghosts of my past decisions. Chloe's words echoed in my head. She was right. She had always been right. The bottom had fallen out, just as she'd predicted. I finally picked up my phone, my hands still shaking, and dialed her number. She picked up on the second ring. "Hey Nick, I was just thinking about you. Saw the news about Natasha's new movie. You must be gearing up for some serious work." And that's when I told her. I told her everything. The phone call, the more professional pedigree, the severance that never came, the eviction notice. I didn't cry this time. My voice was eerily calm, detached, as if I were describing something that had happened to someone else. There was a long silence on her end. When she finally spoke, her voice was low and tight with fury. "That she did not. After everything. No, absolutely not." Another pause. "Where are you?" "In my kitchen. On the floor." "Stay there," she commanded. "I'm on my way." An hour later, Chloe was there, pulling me up off the floor, putting a real cup of tea in my hands, and looking at the eviction notice with a grim expression. She didn't offer pity. She offered something better. Righteous, unfiltered rage on my behalf. "This is not the end, Nicola," she said, her eyes blazing. "This is the beginning. You've been a ghost for 15 years. It's time you learned how to haunt." And in that moment something shifted. The despair didn't vanish, but it crystallized. It turned from a heavy, suffocating fog into a single sharp point of ice in my chest. Chloe was right. The pity party was over. Natasha thought she had buried me, but she'd made a critical mistake. She'd forgotten that I was the one who knew how to survive the fall. And more importantly, I was the one who knew how to get back up. The catalyst wasn't some grand revelation or sudden inheritance. It was the simple, profound act of a true friend seeing my value when my own family had deemed me worthless. It was the realization that my story wasn't over. Natasha had just written herself out of the starring role. It wasn't about revenge. Not yet. At that moment, it was about something far more fundamental. It was about survival. Chloe's apartment became my command center. It was a small, practical space. The walls decorated not with movie posters, but with framed contracts, pay stubs, and union membership cards. They were trophies of a different kind, proof of existence, of professional respect. While I had been chasing the reflected glory of my sister, Chloe had been building a life, one documented, union-sanctioned job at a time. She sat me down at her kitchen table, a laptop open between us. "First things first," she said, her tone all business. "We need to figure out what you are, legally, or more accurately, what you haven't been." For the next few days, we plunged into the labyrinthine world of entertainment law, SAG-AFTRA guidelines, and production contracts. It was a world I had been deliberately kept from. My education was a bitter one. I learned about residuals, the small payments performers receive when a film or show is rerun, something I'd never seen a dime of. I learned about the vast difference in pay scales and insurance coverage between a non-union, independent contractor and a union stunt performer. I learned that what my family had called keeping it simple was in fact a multi-year conspiracy to commit wage theft and insurance fraud. The more I read, the colder the resolve in my chest became. Every article, every union bylaw, was another brick in the wall I was building around my heart. It wasn't about the money. Not really. It was the principle. It was the breathtaking arrogance of it all. They hadn't just used me. They had systematically stripped me of a career, a future, and a professional identity, all to protect Natasha's fragile ego and their precious family myth. "There's nothing here," I said one evening, pushing the laptop away in frustration. 15 years of work, and there's not a single piece of paper with my name on it. No call sheets, no contracts, no pay stubs. I don't exist. "Oh, you exist, Nick," Chloe said, pointing to a YouTube video she had pulled up on her phone. It was a behind-the-scenes featurette from Directive Zero. There was Natasha looking radiant, describing the intricate car chase scene. And there, for a split second in the background, a figure in a black fire suit and helmet was being pulled from the wreckage of a stunt car. The camera lingered for a moment, and I could see the medic gently touching my arm, my scar. "You're right there," Chloe said softly. "You just have to know where to look." That's when the idea began to form. It wasn't a grand, intricate scheme. It was small, specific, and rooted in the one thing they could never take from me. My own body. My leverage wasn't a document or a secret recording. It was written in scar tissue. The foresight, if you can call it that, came from a place of deep familiarity with the man behind the camera on Athelgard's legacy. The director was Marcus Vance, the same Marcus Vance from Echo Point, the man who had pressed his own bandana to my bleeding arm 8 years ago. Marcus was a purist. He was a cinematic titan from an older school of filmmaking, a man who loathed CGI and had a near fetishistic obsession with practical effects and what he called physical truth. He believed that the camera could detect a lie, that an audience could feel the difference between a computer-generated image and a real object, a real person, a real scar. I remembered something he'd said to the press after Echo Point came out. An interviewer had asked about the film's gritty realism. Marcus had grunted and said, "Realism isn't about grit, it's about history. A dent in a piece of armor, a scar on a hero's hand. Those things tell a story that no line of dialogue ever can. They prove the character has lived." He was a man who remembered details. He was a man who valued history, written on the body. It was a long shot, a desperate, insane gamble. But it was the only one I had. Chloe helped me draft the email. We didn't send it to the producers or the casting department. We sent it to Marcus Vance's personal email, an address Chloe had managed to get from a friend who'd worked with him. The subject line was simple: Echo Point, a question about physical truth. The email itself was short and professional. I introduced myself not as Natasha's sister, but as the stunt performer who had been injured on his set 8 years ago. I reminded him of the incident with the frayed wire and the rebar. I told him I had heard he was directing Athelgard's Legacies, and that I was currently between projects. I wished him luck with the production. I didn't ask for a job. I didn't mention Natasha. I just planted a seed, a memory. For 3 agonizing days there was nothing. I started to lose hope. It was a stupid idea. A famous director wasn't going to remember some anonymous stunt girl from a low-budget film he'd made almost a decade ago. I started looking at bus schedules, thinking about leaving Los Angeles for good, maybe finding a quiet town where no one had ever heard of Natasha Starr. Then on the 4th day, an email appeared in my inbox. The sender was MV Productions. My heart hammered against my ribs. My hand was trembling again. But this time it wasn't from weakness, it was from adrenaline. The email was from Marcus's assistant. It was curt and to the point. Mr. Vance remembers the incident. He asks if the scar is still visible. If so, please send a recent high-resolution photograph. Chloe and I looked at each other, a slow, predatory grin spreading across her face. He took the bait, she whispered. We spent the next hour staging a photo shoot in her kitchen. We adjusted the lighting, trying to capture the scar perfectly, the way the light caught the silvery puckered tissue, the unique crescent shape of it, the way it sat on my arm. It was a bizarre form of audition. I sent the photo, my heart pounding with a mixture of terror and exhilarating hope. The reply came less than 20 minutes later. This time it was from Marcus himself. Nicola, I remember. I've been staring at the dailies of your sister for a week, and something has felt false. Her performance is fine, but her physicality is too clean, too perfect. She looks like a doll playing a warrior. The script, in its final pivotal scene, calls for a close-up. The hero, Athelgard, after a lifetime of battle, reaches out to claim her throne. The script specifically says, her hand, scarred and weathered, closes around the hilt of the sword of state. A hand that tells the story of a kingdom won through sacrifice. Your sister's hands are lovely. They look like they've never done a day's work in their life, which I suppose they haven't. Her new stunt team tried to create a prosthetic scar. It looks like a piece of rubber. The camera knows. I want your scar. I want your hand. He then laid out the offer. It wasn't a stunt job. He wanted to hire me as a featured special skills performer. It was a specific union designation, one with a significantly higher pay grade than a standard stunt double. It came with its own contract, its own billing, and this was the part that made the air leave my lungs. My own individual, on-screen credit. I am not hiring you to be Natasha's double, the email concluded. I am hiring you to do a shot your sister is incapable of doing. I will handle the studio. I will handle Natasha. Your agent can contact my production office to negotiate the terms. I expect to see you on set, Monday 9 a.m. I read the email 3 times, my vision blurring. Chloe was reading over my shoulder, and she let out a low whistle. Holy hell, Nicola. He's not just giving you a job, he's giving you a weapon. It wasn't about revenge. I kept telling myself that. But as I sat there, staring at the offer, a cold, sharp, and deeply satisfying thought pierced through the fog of my newfound hope. Natasha had fired me for not being professional enough. And now the most respected director in Hollywood was hiring me back because I was the only one who was authentic enough. She had cast a shadow, and her shadow was about to get its own spotlight. The secret plan was no longer just about survival. It was about reclamation. I was going to get paid. I was going to get credit. And I was going to do it right under my sister's nose. The thought sent a shiver of something that felt dangerously like pleasure down my spine. Walking onto the set of Athelgard's Legacies was like stepping into another dimension. My entire career, a film set had been a place of nervous energy and calculated risk, a place where I existed in the margins. I would arrive early, slip into an unmarked trailer or a corner of the stunt team's tent, and become invisible, waiting to be called upon to perform my brief, violent task. I was a tool, a piece of equipment, and I behaved as such. This time was different. I showed my ID at the gate, and the guard, a burly man named Gus, who had seen me come and go from Natasha's sets for years without a word, did a double take. He looked down at his list, then back at me. "Nicola Starr?" he asked, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Just Nicola," I said, my voice steady. No last name on the call sheet. It was a small, deliberate choice Chloe and I had made during the contract negotiation. I was not Natasha's sister. I was not a star. I was Nicola, a mononym, like Cher or Madonna. It was a petty, private joke, but it made me feel powerful. Gus shrugged and waved me through. "Your trailer is number 7, next to the director's." Trailer number 7. It wasn't the lavish, bus-sized palace that Natasha inhabited, but it was a private space with my name on the door. Just Nicola. Inside, there was a small sofa, a makeup station, and a wardrobe with a single costume hanging in it. The leather and steel gauntlet of the hero, Athelgard. My costume. The first move in this silent takeover wasn't a grand confrontation. It was my very presence. I walked through the bustling heart of the set, the cavernous soundstage, designed to look like a medieval throne room, and I could feel the ripple effect. The crew, the grips, the gaffers, the camera operators, they all knew me. They knew me as Tasha's double, the quiet girl who took the hits. They saw me now, walking not to the stunt tent, but to my own trailer. I saw the confused glances, the whispered conversations behind cupped hands. The established hierarchy of the set had been subtly disrupted. Natasha's reaction was exactly what I had anticipated. I saw her standing by the craft services table, laughing with a producer. Her eyes scanned the set and landed on me. For a split second, her smile froze, a perfect porcelain mask cracking at the edges. Confusion warred with disbelief, then curdled into pure, unadulterated fury. She excused herself and marched towards me, her Louboutin boots clicking menacingly on the concrete floor. "Nikki, what in the world are you doing here?" she hissed, grabbing my arm and pulling me into the shadows behind a large piece of scenery. Her grip was surprisingly strong. I gently removed her hand from my arm. "I work here, Natasha." "You what?" Her voice was a tight whisper of rage. "How?" "I told you, the studio hired a team. You can't be here. It's unprofessional." There it was again. That word. Unprofessional. This time it didn't sting. It amused me. "Marcus hired me," I said calmly, enjoying the way her eyes widened in shock. "He needed someone for a specialty shot. A close-up, a close-up," she scoffed, a nasty, condescending laugh escaping her lips. "A close-up of what?" "Don't be ridiculous. They have hand models for that. If my hands aren't perfect enough for him." "They do," I agreed, letting a small, polite smile touch my lips. "But they don't have my scar." The color drained from her face. She knew exactly which scar I meant. The one she'd stolen for her own fabricated backstory. The one piece of my history she couldn't erase because it was literally a part of me. This was the moment the panic truly began to set in. Her control was slipping, and she couldn't understand how. "You went behind my back," she accused, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and fear. "You schemed to get on this set, to embarrass me." "No, Natasha," I said, my voice still quiet, still calm. It was a stark contrast to her burgeoning hysteria, and I knew it was driving her mad. "You fired me. I was unemployed. I sent my resume to a director I'd worked with before. He remembered my work and hired me for a specific skill. It was all very professional." I turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the shadows, sputtering. I didn't look back. The first move was complete. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't made a scene. I had simply shown up, armed with a contract and a truth she couldn't deny. The next few days were a masterclass in antagonist panic. Natasha tried everything. First, she went to the producers, the same ones she'd been laughing with earlier. I saw them in a heated conversation near her trailer. Later, one of the producers, a slick man in an expensive suit, approached Marcus while he was setting up a shot. I was close enough to overhear. "Marcus," the producer said, trying for a friendly man-to-man tone. "About this Nicola person." Natasha is feeling a bit unsettled. She feels it's a conflict of interest, a bit of a family drama distraction we don't need on a picture this big. Marcus didn't even look up from his viewfinder. Is Natasha's hand going to magically grow a backstory-rich, perfectly aged scar in the next 2 weeks, Bob? Well, no, but our effects team. Your effects team gave me a piece of latex that looked like a shed snakeskin. Marcus cut him off, his voice dripping with disdain. I am shooting a $300 million epic about an iron-willed queen, and the entire emotional climax rests on a single shot of her hand claiming her birthright. That shot needs to feel real. It needs history. Nicola's hand has history. Therefore, Nicola is in my movie. Is there anything else? The producer, Bob, slunk away, defeated. Round 1 to Marcus. Natasha's next tactic was to try and ice me out. She instructed her new stunt team, a group of grim-faced, hyper-masculine men who looked more like mercenaries than performers, to have nothing to do with me. They would walk past my trailer, pointedly ignoring me. She tried to get the makeup and wardrobe departments to prioritize her, to make me wait, to treat me like the subordinate she believed I was. But it backfired. The crew, the veterans who had been in the trenches for decades, had a finely tuned sense of justice. They had seen Natasha's entitlement and my quiet professionalism for years. They saw a quiet, competent woman who had been fired and was now back on her own terms, while the pampered star threw a silent tantrum. So they rallied. The head of wardrobe, a woman named Maria, would bring me my gauntlet personally, saying, "Let's get the real hero ready first." The coffee PA would always bring me my tea, before taking Natasha her complicated, 6-adjective latte. They were small acts of rebellion, a silent endorsement that was more powerful than any loud declaration of support. They were my allies, and they had chosen their side without me ever having to ask. The panic in Natasha's eyes grew with each passing day. Her performance, which Marcus had already found lacking, became stiffer, more brittle. She was distracted, constantly watching me, trying to find a mistake, a reason to get me thrown off the set. But I gave her nothing. I was a model employee. I arrived on time. I sat quietly in my trailer, reading or stretching. I was polite to everyone. I was doing exactly what she had accused me of being incapable of. I was being a professional, and it was destroying her. She was the star of a blockbuster film, surrounded by a team of her choosing, and yet she was being completely and utterly outmaneuvered by a ghost she thought she had exorcised. The silent takeover was working better than I could have ever imagined. She was losing control, and the real power shift was yet to come. The third week of filming brought with it an unwelcome, yet entirely predictable, escalation. The arrival of our parents. Eleanor and Robert descended upon the set like a pair of regal vultures, ready to bask in the reflected glory of their golden child, Natasha. They had a long-standing tradition of visiting her on set, where they would hold court, telling fawning producers and assistants charming anecdotes about Natasha's prodigious talent, all while completely ignoring the stunt team and crew who made her look good. Their presence had always been a source of quiet humiliation for me. They would walk past me, sometimes literally stepping over my bruised body, as I recovered from a take, without a flicker of recognition. I was part of the machinery, a cog in the great Natasha Star enterprise. This time, however, I wasn't a cog. I had my own trailer. They spotted me sitting in my canvas chair, reading a book, the name Nicola emblazoned on the back. My mother, Eleanor, stopped dead in her tracks, her perfectly manicured hand flying to her chest in a gesture of theatrical surprise. My father, Robert, just stared, his jaw tight. Nicola, my mother trilled, her voice carrying across the set. What a surprise. Natasha didn't tell us you were visiting. She bustled over, followed by my father. Their smiles were stretched thin, barely concealing their confusion and annoyance. They were masters of maintaining the family narrative, and my presence here was an unapproved edit. I'm not visiting, Mother, I said, closing my book and standing up. I remained calm, my voice even. I'm working. My father scoffed, looking me up and down. I was wearing simple black leggings and a t-shirt, not a costume. To him I looked like a PA. Doing what? Fetching coffee? I hope you're not getting in Natasha's way. She needs to focus. This was their classic move: diminish, dismiss, and define my existence only in relation to Natasha. For years it had worked. For years I would have mumbled an apology and made myself scarce. Not this time. Actually, I said, looking my father directly in. Marcus Vance hired me as a special skills performer. I have a pivotal scene in the film. Their smiles vanished completely. This was not part of the script. The idea that I could have a role, any role, independent of their star daughter, was unthinkable. It was a crack in the very foundation of their family hierarchy. Just then Natasha emerged from her trailer, her face a mask of forced serenity. Mother, Dad, you're here, she exclaimed, rushing to embrace them. It was a performance for the benefit of the crew, who were now watching this little family drama with undisguised interest. I see you found Nikki, she said, her voice laced with a false saccharine sweetness. Isn't it great? She's helping out with a few little things. Little things, my father repeated, latching onto the phrase. I see. The narrative was restored, at least in his mind. But the power shift had already occurred, and it was cemented by what happened next. My mother, trying to re-establish the old order, turned to me with a dismissive wave of her hand. Nikki, darling, be a dear and run and get Natasha her throat coat tea, would you, and a water for your father. No ice. It was a public test, a command disguised as a request. The entire set, it seemed, went quiet. The crew, Maria from wardrobe, Gus from security, they were all watching. They were watching to see if the ghost would fall back into her old patterns. I looked at my mother, at the entitled expectation in her eyes. I looked at my father, who was already turning away, assuming his order would be obeyed. I looked at Natasha, who was watching me with a smug, challenging glint in her eyes, and I felt nothing. No anger, no resentment, just a profound sense of distance. I'm sorry, Mother, I said, my voice clear and carrying in the quiet hangar. But that's not my job. The production assistants are over there. I pointed towards the craft services table. I'm sure they'd be happy to help. You could have heard a pin drop. Eleanor's face went pale, then flushed a blotchy, angry red. My father turned back, his mouth agape. Natasha's smug expression dissolved into one of pure shock. I had never, in my entire life, said no to them. The family exodus, as I later thought of it, wasn't a physical departure. It was a psychic one. In that moment, by refusing to perform my assigned role as the family servant, I had exiled myself from their tiny, toxic kingdom, and I had never felt so free. Their attempts at counter-manipulation became desperate and clumsy. Later that day, my father cornered me by my trailer. His approach was different. The dismissive patriarch was gone, replaced by a concerned, confidential tone. Nikki, he started, your sister is under a lot of pressure. This film, it's everything. She needs our support. She needs her family to be a rock for her, not a distraction. Whatever little game you're playing with this director, it needs to stop. You're upsetting her. I'm not playing a game, Dad, I replied. I'm doing a job, the same way she is. It's not the same, he hissed, his composure cracking. She is the star. Everything revolves around her. You've always understood that. What's changed? I said simply. The final desperate ploy came from Natasha herself. The day before my scene was scheduled to be shot, she approached me, her face a mask of faux concern. Nikki, I've been thinking, she said, her voice soft and conciliatory. "This whole thing has been a misunderstanding. I was stressed when I called you. The pressure, it's immense. Of course, I want you here. You're my sister." She paused, as if for dramatic effect. "Listen, I talked to the producers. We don't need you to do this scene. The effects team has figured it out. They've made a new prosthetic. It's perfect. You don't have to go through with this. You can just go home. I'll make sure you're taken care of, properly this time, for the good of the family." It was the ultimate manipulation, an offer of the very thing I had once craved: her approval, her financial protection in exchange for my invisibility. "Go back to being the shadow, Nikki. Let me stand in the light." But I had stood in the light of my own small trailer for weeks now, and my eyes had adjusted. I knew what she was doing. She wasn't trying to protect me. She was trying to erase me one last time. "No, thank you, Natasha," I said, a real, genuine smile touching my lips for the first time. "I have a contract. And besides," I added, holding up my arm and looking at the silvery crescent on my skin, "I think Marcus prefers the original. It has more history." Her face crumbled. The mask of the concerned sister, the powerful star, the golden child, it all fell away, revealing the terrified, jealous woman underneath. She had played her last card, and it was a bluff. The power had irrevocably shifted. The next day, I would shoot my scene, and there was absolutely nothing she could do to stop it. The morning of the shoot was still and tense. On a normal film set, there's a constant, chaotic hum of activity. But today, a respectful hush had fallen over the soundstage. Everyone knew this wasn't just another shot. It was a culmination, a quiet climax to a drama that had been playing out for weeks in the margins of the blockbuster being filmed. Maria from wardrobe fitted the gauntlet over my hand and forearm. It was heavy, made of real leather and steel, cold against my skin. As she tightened the last buckle, she gave my shoulder a quick, firm squeeze. It was a small gesture, but it felt like a transfer of strength. I walked from my trailer to the throne room set, the crew parting for me silently. Natasha was already there, in full costume, seated on the massive, ornate throne. She was supposed to be in the background of the shot, a shallow focus presence behind the hand that was the real star. She wouldn't look at me. She just stared at a point in the middle distance, her jaw set like stone. Our parents were there too, standing near the video village where the monitors were set up, their expressions grim. They looked like they were attending a funeral. In a way, they were. The funeral of their carefully constructed family narrative. Marcus Vance met me at the base of the throne. He looked me in the eye, his gaze intense. "Nervous?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. "No," I said, and I was surprised to find that it was true. "I've fallen off buildings for a living. This is just holding still." He let out a short, sharp laugh. "Good. Now, Nicola, the story here is simple. You are Athelgard. You have fought for 20 years to reclaim this throne. You've bled for it. This sword is your birthright. When your hand closes on the hilt, it is not a seizure of power, it is a homecoming. I want to see the history of that war, the weight of that sacrifice, and the finality of that peace, all in the way your fingers curl around the steel. Do you understand?" "I understand," I said, and I did. He wasn't just talking about Athelgard. The camera, a massive piece of equipment on a crane, swooped in. It was a macro lens, designed to capture every detail. My hand, my arm, my scar, filled the monitors in the video village. I could feel Natasha's glare on the back of my neck. I could feel my parents' icy disapproval. I blocked it all out. I thought about the years of being the tough one, the reliable one. I thought about the broken bones, the bruises, the casual dismissals. I thought about the girl on the kitchen floor, staring at an eviction notice. I channeled all of it, the pain, the rage, the quiet endurance into my hand. "Action," Marcus called. I lifted my arm into the frame. The camera focused on the jagged, silvery scar. It looked magnificent under the studio lights, a character in its own right. I slowly, deliberately, reached for the hilt of the sword embedded in the arm of the throne. My fingers brushed against the cold, worn steel. I closed my hand around it, my knuckles white with pressure. It was not a violent grasp. It was a firm, undeniable claiming of what was mine. I held it, steady and sure. It was a homecoming. A long silence stretched out. Then Marcus's voice boomed through the soundstage. Cut. Print it. That's a wrap on the royal hand. A smattering of applause broke out from the crew. It was a breach of on-set etiquette, but no one cared. It was for me. I felt a lump form in my throat as I gently released the sword. I had done it. The confrontation I had been steeling myself for came as soon as I got back to my trailer. Natasha was waiting for me, her arms crossed, her face pale and furious. She pushed the door shut behind her. "Are you happy now?" she spat, her voice venomous. "You did it. You embarrassed me in front of my own crew. You humiliated our parents. I hope it was worth it." I sat down on the small sofa, the adrenaline starting to fade, leaving a profound and weary calm in its place. "It was never about embarrassing you, Natasha. Oh, spare me the noble act," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "You planned this from the moment I made that call. You've always been jealous. You've always resented my success, and you took the first opportunity you could to stab me in the back." The accusation was so outrageously false, so perfectly inverted from the truth, that I couldn't help but let out a short, tired laugh. The sound seemed to enrage her further. "It wasn't about revenge, Natasha," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "Not at first. It was about surviving. You left me with nothing. No job, no money, no references. You threw me away like a piece of garbage. What did you expect me to do? Just disappear?" "Yes," she cried, her eyes wide with a crazed, desperate honesty. "That was the deal. That was always the deal. I'm the star. You're the support. I get the glory. You get the cash. You stay in the background. You were never supposed to want the spotlight." And there it was, the truth, raw and ugly. It wasn't about professionalism, or insurance, or studio demands. It was about her terror of being exposed, of sharing the credit, of someone realizing that the brilliant, brave Natasha Starr was a collaborative fiction. "I didn't break the deal, Natasha," I said, standing up to face her. For the first time, I felt taller than her. "You did. You fired me. You told me I wasn't good enough. You told me I wasn't professional enough. And then your brilliant, top-tier director decided that the one thing he needed to make his movie work, the one piece of authenticity he couldn't fake, was the very thing you threw away. This isn't my fault. This is yours." She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing, but no words came out. The new reality was finally sinking in. She hadn't been beaten by some elaborate Machiavellian scheme. She had been beaten by a scar. She had been beaten by a truth she had tried, and failed, to bury. She had lost, and the worst part, for her, was that she had no one to blame but herself. She finally turned, her shoulders slumped in defeat, and walked out of my trailer, leaving the door open behind her. The confrontation was over, and I had won. The movie premiere was 6 months later. I wasn't there as Natasha's +1, a role I had played a dozen times, standing awkwardly to the side while she posed for the cameras. I received my own invitation from the studio. I walked the red carpet alone, in a simple, elegant dress that didn't try to compete with the blockbuster glamour around me. I didn't have to. When a journalist from a trade magazine recognized me from the set, they asked what it was like working on the film. I just smiled and said, "Marcus Vance is a genius. He has an incredible eye for authenticity." The quote was printed the next day. Sitting in the darkened theater, I felt a familiar knot of anxiety in my stomach. But when the final scene arrived, the anxiety vanished. The camera pushed in, past Natasha's tear-streaked, beautifully lit face, and focused. There, on a screen 40 feet high, was my hand, my scar, a story of sacrifice, projected for the world to see. And then, the credits rolled. The names flew by: producers, cinematographers, editors, and then, for a fraction of a second, a single card, special skills performer, Nicola. It was small, it was easy to miss, but it was there, it was real, and it was mine. A quiet sob of pure, unadulterated vindication escaped my lips. I had my name back. The aftermath was subtle, but satisfying. The movie was a colossal hit, but the buzz in the industry, the narrative that trickled down into the reviews and think pieces, was all about Marcus Vance's brilliant, gritty realism. Several major critics singled out the final shot, calling it a moment of profound physical storytelling and a testament to the power of a single authentic detail. Natasha got her blockbuster, but her performance was largely seen as secondary to the director's vision. Her brand as the action hero who did it all herself was quietly, permanently tarnished. People in the industry knew. They knew she couldn't do the one shot that mattered most. The calls started coming in a week later, not for stunt work, not to be a shadow. Directors and casting agents wanted to hire me, Nicola, for my special skills. One needed a character with a believable limp. Another was looking for a swimmer with the powerful, weathered shoulders of a lifelong athlete. My scars, my calluses, my oddly jointed shoulder, the very things I had once seen as the wreckage of my life, had become my resume. My body was my brand. I hired Chloe's agent, signed with the union under my own name, and started building a career, a real one. So here I am now, and I wanted to tell you this story, directly, because I think there's a lesson in it that's easy to miss. We all have scars. Some are on the outside, silvery crescents on our skin, that tell a story, but most of them are on the inside. They are the wounds left by people who told us we weren't good enough, who asked us to stay in the shadows so they could shine brighter, who defined our worth only by what we could do for them. For years, I let my sister and my family define me by my ability to absorb pain for their benefit. I thought my sacrifice was my value, but what I learned on that film set, what I learned from a director who saw history where my sister saw a flaw, is that your scars are not your weakness. They are proof that you have survived. They are a testament to your strength, your endurance, your history. They are the one thing that is authentically, uniquely yours. Don't let anyone convince you to hide them. Don't let anyone tell you they make you unprofessional or unworthy, because sometimes, the very thing that someone else tried to use to bury you is the one thing that will allow you to stand in the light and claim what is yours. My sister built her career on my broken bones, but I built my new life on the scars they left behind, and I wouldn't trade them for anything. Thanks for listening to my story. If you've ever felt like the shadow in someone else's life, I hope this gives you a little bit of strength. Let me know in the comments if you've ever had a moment where something you thought was a weakness turned out to be your greatest asset. I read all the comments, and I'm looking forward to hearing your stories. And if you enjoyed this, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more. It really does help. Take care of yourselves, and don't be afraid of your own history.